All right, guys. Newcastle have just come from behind to beat Brentford by 2 goals to 1 in what was definitely a game of two halves. First half, we saw quite a dominant performance from Brentford. I thought the forward duo of Ivan Toney and Kevin Schade worked brilliantly. Up until this past week or so, we've only really seen snippets of Kevin Schade for Brentford. I think he had a full 90 minutes in the FA Cup in one of the games, but we haven't yet to see the best of him until today, and he looks very lively and a player that looks like he will suit Brentford very much. And I think Brian Mbeumo has got a job on his hands to get back into the starting 11 after that first half performance, in particular from Schade. There were a few talking points in the first half. Ivan Toney had the ball in the back of the net, getting first to a sort of, I wouldn't say spillage from Nick Pope, but he rebounded the initial effort and stuck it in the roof of the net, but it was correctly disallowed. He was just leaning offside, and it was a Newcastle performance that you don't really associate with them this season. It wasn't very high intensity in the first half, and also defensively that there were a lot of gaps in their defence which Brentford were able to exploit, whether it be with Josh Da Silva in midfield. He was the one out of the three who was trying to really push on forward. The two forwards in Toney and Schade, or even the wing backs in Hickey and Henry. They were really managing to find lots of space. The first penalty came from Schade managing to sort of skin that Dan Burn, get past him. And he took a heavy touch and it looked like it had got away from him, but he manages to just nip it past Sven Botman, who inevitably takes him out with the amount of force that he was running towards the ball with. It was, no avoiding that from Botman, really. It was one of them where it's like, you got to go for it, hope for the best. And Toney steps up to take the penalty. Now, you think another inevitability is not just the penalty being given, but Ivan Toney scoring it. And that was not the case the first time round. It was actually saved by Nick Pope, and Nick Pope does the correct thing when coming up against Ivan Toney taking the penalty. The only chance you've got of saving a penalty for Ivan Toney, who, by the way, scored his previous 32 penalties all consecutively, which is an incredible rate of scoring penalties. The only chance you've got of saving them is by staying still, not giving yourself away, because that's what Toney wants you to do. He doesn't look at the ball, Toney, he looks at the keeper. He's confident enough to know where the ball is when he's kicking it, and he is confident to know that he can put his foot in the right position to put the ball wherever he wants to on the goal. So the only chance you've got is to hope that Toney doesn't put much power in it, wait for him to kick it, then save it. And Pope does that the first time round, which was really well thought out. I'm assuming they would have looked into that in training in the week, and it was a brilliant save by Pope in the end, just because of the way that Toney takes penalties, because he made it, Nick Pope, the best compliment I can give him is that he made Toney's penalty look weak, because all Toney's done is taken a really slow run up and side-footed it, not even really in the corner. So, yeah, fair play to Nick Pope. But then Newcastle, they still weren't really getting any players forward. They weren't really causing David Raya and the Brentford defence many problems, and this was a Brentford defence that had been weakened by Pontus Jansson having to go off injured once again, their captain, and having to be replaced by Zanker, I think it was, Matthias Jorgensen, whatever you call him, really. I think he goes by both. But yeah, so it was a weakened Brentford defence, not having their captain, and Newcastle weren't really managing to cause them many problems in the first half. And just before half-time, another penalty, this time from a corner. Alexander Isak makes a bit of a clumsy decision to try and strike the ball when Rico Henry's coming across him. Henry gets there first, and there is contact, but it's not enough to send Henry down. because Henry does go down, and you've got to in that situation. And it's not the kick that sends him down, it's the fact that he wants a penalty. But whenever there's contact in that situation, it's got to be a penalty. All Henry's really done by going down is basically alerting the referee on, I think I should have a penalty here. And it is a penalty. And Ivan Toney steps up to take it. This time, Pope goes the right way, but Toney puts a little bit of height on it just so it goes just above Pope. So Toney made no mistake the second time round. And that made it 1-0 at half time. I think it was a lead that Brentford thoroughly deserved, because they just were so much better. But Eddie Howe at half time made a couple of substitutions, and they changed the game, bringing on Anthony Gordon and Callum Wilson. Callum Wilson, in particular, I think, was the one who was the game changer, because Gordon came on for Murphy, and Murphy had a fairly, I don't want to use any harsh words, but unnoticeable performance in the first half, I would say. He didn't really impose himself on the game, didn't cause any problems. But he that's sometimes the case with him. But one thing you'll always get is hard work. But it just wasn't enough to break down Brentford at any point in the first half. Gordon came on, so that's like for like. But Eddie Howe took a midfielder off and pushed Callum Wilson right far forward. So it was almost like a 4-2-4 or 4-4-2 formation. Now, what I believe this did in the second half, and how it sort of stopped Brentford from getting on top and pushing their wing back forwards and putting a lot of pressure on Newcastle, was that having two wide players who aren't going to be playing as wingers. So you had Joe Willock the one side, and you had Anthony Gordon the other side. What that meant is it meant that that was outnumbering the Brentford back three. So that meant that Rico Henry and Aaron Hickey were both not given as much licence to get forwards, purely because there's a lot more risk to it. And that's where the start of Newcastle's comeback to this game came from, I believe. It just meant that Brentford couldn't really push their wing-backs forward, which is a huge part of the way that they play football under Thomas Frank. So that was an instant disadvantage for them. And then also you've got the two up front for Newcastle of Isak and Wilson. Now, Isak and Wilson haven't had many minutes on the pitch. Haven't had many minutes on the pitch together. So far this season, mainly due to both of them having injury problems throughout the season, not being fit at the same time. But over the past couple of months, there's been points in games where they've been on the pitch together, but sometimes Eddie Howe prefers just to play one of them. That's been the case a lot recently. But in this game, they linked up brilliantly, and I think Callum Wilson, for me, was the game changer in this game. The first goal it's neither of them really, except from maybe you could say that the movement sort of pulled Brentford's defence away a little bit and focused on them, which allowed Joe Linton to have the space. But it's largely down to the footwork of Joe Linton initially, and then a bit of luck with the deflection of David Raya, because it's not a shot at all from Joe Linton, it's a cross. But it deflects off Raya and goes in, and that's Newcastle level. And they managed to get the winner through Isak. Once again, Callum Wilson and Isak link up, like I said. And it is a brilliant strike from Isak. And that's what he's got in his locker. He can strike a ball brilliantly. And I think I'd even argue for as good a goal scorer as Callum Wilson is. And if you could guarantee Wilson to be fit for 80-90% of the season, I think he, out of all the players in the Premier League right now, because he's been in the Premier League a long time, he's got to have been in there 8 years now, I think he'd be right up there into, like, not far off players like, I don't know, Harry Kane in terms of his time in the league. Now, I think he'd, okay, Harry Kane's a bit of a stretch, but he would have, because, I mean, he's not playing for as good a team as Harry Kane for most of that time, but I think he would have easily surpassed the 100 goal mark in the Premier League. So, yeah, that's what I think of Callum Wilson as a finisher, but I would still say that Alexander Isak, from outside the box, probably still has the better strike on him than Callum Wilson. So Isak is a player who, if he can, you know, improve some of his weak areas as a forward, he can become a world class striker easily. And yeah, Callum Wilson even had the ball in the back of the net himself with about 20 minutes to go. It did get disallowed, and it was quite hard from the VAR replay, to tell, to be honest, because it definitely hits his shoulder/arm area, but it's really hard to tell if it's on the sleeve or not. I think it might have just hit his arm, so I can understand why VAR did disallow it, but it was a good finish nonetheless. And yeah, in the end, Brentford, they just came up short in the last 20 minutes. They gave it a real good go. They brought Mbeumo on and just like really threw everything at it. But despite Ivan Toney coming close with headers on 2 occasions, Nick Pope saving one and the other one floating just over the bar, Brentford just couldn't quite do it. And, you know, it was just one of them. They've come up against a very good Newcastle team who weren't at their best in the first half, but had the resilience to come back from what was a poor performance and turn it into a brilliant result, which is what teams who are near the top of the table tend to do. So yeah, that's a really a good sign for Newcastle in terms of how far they've come. But for Brentford, it's only their second home defeat this season, I believe, and the first was against a brilliant Arsenal team back in September. So it's been a long time since they've lost at home, and you know they're still a very good team, and they could have easily been 2 or 3 goals up on another day at half time, and that could be game over because they wouldn't have felt the need to keep pushing as many men forward. So yeah, it's just one of them for that Brentford, really. I think it's going to be tough for them to get a European spot this season. That I think they might still be in 7th position. I'm not 100% sure. Aston Villa won today, so maybe they're not. But they still can push for a European spot. That's definitely got to be an aim for them, I think. But whatever you say about them, the performances this season have been another step forwards, even upon last season, which was seen as a really solid first season in the Premier League. This year, they've managed to take another step forward. So if they can keep on improving under Thomas Frank, I mean, that's all that Brentford fans are going to want at the end of the day. I don't think Brentford fans are expecting them to be anywhere near like challenging for the Premier League title, because they they don't have the financial unlimitedness of some of the bigger teams in the Premier League, some of the teams like the top 6. So yeah, if Brentford can just keep improving, maintain a place in the top half of the table, I think Brentford fans would be fairly satisfied with that. But yeah, for Newcastle, I mean, their chances of getting top 4 this season are looking stronger and stronger. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.